I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Professor Dave Reay from the University of Edinburgh to speak to us on this podcast. Dave has just stepped down as Director of the Edinburgh Climate Change Institute and is co-chair of the Just Transition Commission, which advises the Scottish Government. And Dave is the author of several books on climate change, including books on how individuals like us, the listeners of this podcast, can help with climate change. I first met Dave because I'd written a book on food and climate change, and then my publisher pointed out another book on the same topic with almost the same title. So I spent a while thinking that I'd wasted 3 years of my life. But anyway, it worked out fine in the end. And on the plus side, I got to meet Dave and find out he's a fantastic person. So thank you, Dave, for joining us.
Great to see you, Sarah. And for your listeners, if you're interested in food and climate change, buy Sarah's book, not mine. It's much better.
So, Dave, the point of this podcast is to help people who want to address climate change through the food that we eat. And so, first of all, it'd be great to set the scene. So in the context of other contributions to climate change, just how important is food, in your opinion?
Yeah, it's right up there. I mean, if you look at all the emissions from human activities around the world, it's roughly a third of those emissions, so it's huge. And if we think about our day-to-day lives, it's a major part of our emissions for most of us. So there's basically four things where we affect the climate through our emissions as individuals. So that is transport, energy, stuff we buy, and food. Food's quite special because obviously we need it, we can't do without it. And you always get some emissions from producing food, and there always will be. Across our lifestyles, if we think about transport, home energy use, the stuff we consume, they're the other three big parts of the pie where we can have a big impact. And one of the key things that's happening with those is because our electricity is starting to get greener, so we're producing more and more electricity from renewables, we should get to a place where when we go on a train, it's electric and it's really low carbon. When we could all actually manage to afford them, electric vehicles should mean that really low carbon transport. Food will still have a substantial carbon footprint, even as we decarbonise the energy system. And so that makes food one of those things which become bigger and bigger in terms of its proportion of the pie in UK emissions and global emissions. And so the importance of us to be supported to make changes in that, to lower our carbon footprint, will grow and grow over time. And, you know, like you put so well in your book, there are so many different choices you can make in terms of the food choices you get day to day, which will shave emissions off your carbon footprint.
So how big a fraction is the decisions that we make as individuals compared to what's being done for us that we can't really affect?
So it's about 60% of the emissions that we produce, and so the emissions we have to cut right back on to get to net zero are down to our choices as individuals, as householders, as people within society, I guess, the kind of choices we make. So government, industry, they have a really big role, technology has a really big role, but if you think about it, all of those businesses, even the oil companies, and all of the governments, in theory, they're all a product of what we choose. We've got skin in the game across the piece, but actually that transition to net zero, which is what I mainly work on, more than half of that is down essentially to the kind of choices we make as individuals and households. Okay.
So if we just focus on food then, changing the food system and changing the food that we eat is a really big thing. We're probably happy to try new foods, but we might have quite a sentimental attachment to quite a lot of food because it's such a cultural thing. So how feasible is it really for us to change our diets?
I mean, a good test, I suppose, is have you tried anything new in the last 10 years? And most of us have, because our taste changed. There's kind of so many really nice recipes come out. There's also, with the cost of living crisis, we've all been forced to have a look at price tags more and try out meals which are cheaper, and that's obviously ongoing. So it is feasible to change, definitely. Like you say, food is such an emotive subject because it goes to the heart of who we are often as individuals and our cultures. But I guess with the changing diet piece, as we'll get onto, in terms of tackling climate change, it's such an important one. And a lot of the changes we can make, you don't have to go full hair shirt on it. So it's not about going, right, I need to completely reinvent my diet, find this really green food supplier on the other side of the planet and get all my stuff from there. Actually, it comes down to, for most of us, having a meat-free day, for instance. Those kind of changes, they have big knock-on effects in terms of emissions from the food system.
So have you changed your diet since you started working on this?
Yeah, and it's been a gradual process. I went largely vegetarian, must be about 10 years ago. And I classed myself before that as a normal meat eater. And I always justified that on the basis that I wasn't a massive meat eater and it was part of a reasonably balanced diet. And the big trigger for me, I knew generally a meat-based diet has a higher carbon footprint than a plant-based diet. That sticks across the board pretty much as a rule. But my youngest daughter, we were out at a wedding and they were loading up these chickens on these huge skewers in these big glass cabinets to cook them for the evening. And she didn't say anything at the time, but then when we got home after the wedding, she said, "Look, Mum and Dad, I'm not going to eat meat anymore. She really put her off it." So she was the impetus, actually, was her kind of saying, "I don't want to eat it," and it just made it easier for us all to eat the same thing. And then over that decade, it's got easier because of all the plant-based alternatives. So the cost is still an issue, I'd argue, but it's helped a lot having the kids behind us. So the youngest, obviously, she was the key driver. Her older sister was on board with it as well. So we didn't have to have any battles, which was great.
And that's a really good point about how it's a social thing. It actually depends on other people. When I first learned about this, I just went vegan for a year because I was just like, oh my goodness, this is just a crisis, But I really like what you said about not having to completely wholesale or change everything. And actually, there's a lot that you can do, which is a lot simpler than that. Are there any particular things that you found, like, for example, I was very excited to discover that just chucking a can of beans into stuff is just like the easiest that you can do, and yet actually really great in terms of reducing climate impact. Is there any sort of tips like that you'd give that would be helpful to people?
Yeah, I mean, things like that are brilliant. I mean, one of the things I always come at this with is kind of, so cost is really important. And then for me, are you going to eat it? Is a really good question. So if you end up with loads of plant-based stuff which goes in the bin, then that's basically just adding to the problem. That's not helping no one. And the other thing I always kind of think about is health. And so one of the things I did, because I was putting on weight, particularly during the pandemic, eating lots of snacks. And then I looked at Our World in Data, which if any of your listeners want a brilliant source of information on everything, then go to them. But Hannah Ritchie, who's their head of research, she works particularly on food. And she's got this brilliant set of data. So I went on there and I kind of was looking at the different things. And one of the things that came out really clearly was nuts. So things like hazelnuts, and in a lot of supermarkets, the standard bags of nuts have a really low carbon footprint. So basically because you're growing a tree to then get the nuts. And I also looked at some of the NHS advice around snacks, not just in terms of weight, but the salt and all of that stuff. And the advice was, well, eat some nuts, particularly someone my age, it's good for prostate. But I love nuts. And so that's what I have now instead of my snacks. I'm still not there with the weights, but it's helping.
Okay, so lots of tips there. It's quite a big burden on individuals, isn't it? So like, how much should individual people be trying very, very hard versus, some people would say we should change the whole system and make it easier for people rather than everybody, every supermarket trip. I got stuck in the supermarket so many times looking at all the shelves and trying to decide what to do. I'm banned from going to the supermarket now. So should we change the system or is it up to individuals?
The two are interlinked. So if we think about how having access to plant-based alternatives has changed over the last 10 years, it's been about consumer demand growing enough so that it becomes mainstream. So Pret a Manger had these basically vegetarian Prets around London mainly, I think, and they decided not to do them because they say, well, every Pret's a vegetarian Pret now because vegetarianism and the plant-based options have become more mainstream. And I think one of the things we see with a lot of the individual actions is you have the early adopters who, unfortunately for them, have to take the pain because it's hard to get stuff and maybe, it's more expensive, the range isn't there. But we're kind of past that point with plant-based foods in general. I still think there's a way to go in terms of some of the prices. But in terms of options in the main supermarkets, there is quite a good range now. The analogy for me is I was an early adopter of electric cars. So we got an electric car early. And that was one of the most controversial things in our family because it only had a range of 70 miles. And so when we had trips, and we did trips down to London and things, we had to stop 6 times to charge.
Oh my goodness.
And the kids, this is with 2 young kids, going mental in the back by about halfway. And so that was something which I kind of imposed on the family, which I wish I hadn't done in some respects, because the journeys tended to be pretty awful. But now, because of technology, but also demand driving that technology and the price, the ranges of electric cars are like 5 times that, and so that issue's got, and the chargers are more widespread and generally more reliable. So yeah, if you're an early adopter, then you take some of the pain. But I think where we are with food now is it's easier. That with the caveat that people still quite rightly need to look at the price and what their kids are going to eat and what their partner's going to eat and what they're going to eat. But it's definitely moved in the right direction.
One point somebody made to me once was that actually we don't necessarily need everybody to change their diet to actually drive the producers to change, because actually sort of swing voters who move supermarkets are actually quite influential. So even if it's only 5% of people that are changing, that kind of a big influence.
Yeah, and the supermarkets are really good, particularly with modern technology, to track what we're buying. And if we're buying more stuff which is, say, plant-based, then they will provide more of it. So yeah, it's kind of self-fulfilling in that way.
But what do you think are the main barriers to the whole system changing to make it easier for us to eat more climate-friendly foods?
So fundamentally, I think the food system globally I think it's broken, Sarah. I really do. So one of the biggest barrier I guess we've got is, in terms of the global food system moving to where it needs to be, is, as ever, vested interests. It's about protectionism in terms of food markets and supply chains. So I think on that global level, the main barrier is it's politics. On a domestic scale for the UK, the biggest barrier for change is price. So you can go on all you like I try not to, about the importance of getting to net zero, and all of us, I think, have a part to play in that, whether it's how we vote, like I say, or what we buy, what food we eat. But that's secondary to just feeding your kids and yourself, and particularly has been over the last few years. And so we need to have affordable, good quality food which has a minimal impact in terms of its carbon footprint. And that can include meat. And actually, we're in a country where we produce meat which is really high quality and low emission. That's not to say that meat still has a higher carbon footprint than if I went for the plant-based alternative, which is the crucial thing. But if you're going to eat meat, then I'd say the message needs to be that, go for, I'd say Scottish, but go for British meat. Go for high quality, make sure, and this comes back to our current government, making sure that those trade agreements are thinking about that quality and the wider impact on the supply chains, the sustainability of the suppliers overseas as well. And I think ultimately for everyone to have that choice to go completely plant-based, making sure that there's not distortion in the market, so the price is representing the reality of that production. And we're at a stage now where, the plant-based meats, and I guess even the kind of artificial meats, which have been really expensive in the past, we could see in the next few years them being really competitive with farm-produced meat, so livestock. And at that stage, then I think we'll see a big switch actually away from livestock meat to the alternatives. With my Just Transition hat on though, I'd say that needs to happen in terms of reducing emissions. We still need meat production, so livestock farmers in the UK and Scotland, and they do really high quality production. If they are selling less of this high quality meat, then that needs to be supported in terms of farm support. It needs to attract a premium in terms of price to make sure their livelihood's protected.
So you're not saying that everyone should go vegan?
No. I mean, it's kind of, I don't know how your experience of going vegan was. It is a really low impact way in terms of eating. It's got the lowest carbon footprint, but it just doesn't work for a lot of people. One of my children has an eating disorder, and if we went vegan, she would love it probably, because it would mean she would eat even less. And so one of the things we've had to do is work around just the realities in our family of her health and getting calories into her. And also for me, when we've looked at vegan alternatives there's a cost premium to some of the options, certainly when we were looking at it. And I don't think it's necessary. I think, if we as a nation just reduced how often we have meat, just have a meat-free day once a week, that has a big impact right away. So, if you're going to go full vegan, then good luck to you, and hopefully that will become more economical and that fits with folks' lifestyles. But just eating less meat or going vegetarian and plant-based, they themselves make a really big difference.
Just to sort of step outside a bit more, I don't want to get too dark, but you've written a book about the impact of climate change on food. So can you tell us a bit about that? Can we just carry on as we are anyway? What's going to happen?
Yeah, so I mean, it's quite startling how vulnerable our food is to climate change. I suppose we've seen it at times in terms of some things disappearing off the shelves and some things going really high in price just in the last couple of years. But often that's confounded by global markets. So one of the big issues we're seeing with climate change is it's affecting producers in other parts of the world, so not in the UK. So we might have big reductions in cereal crops like wheat, for instance. And what that tends to do is push the global price up, but it also makes countries really worried about them being able to feed their own people. So then they impose export limitations. India's done this in the last couple of years, and then that has a knock-on effect again in terms of the global price and supply, like we're seeing with Ukraine actually in terms of export and prices. And so those kind of impacts, they ripple right round the world. And for a system like ours, we are relatively resilient. So you might go into your supermarket and go, the bread's gone up, 20p a loaf, or I can't get my particular brand of whatever you want, but there'll be enough food to eat. Whereas for a lot of folk in the world, what that means is that their normal weekly income can't cover the food they need because of those price hikes globally. So there's that really stark human side to it, that climate change impacts on food make more people hungry. When I was going through, in my book, I looked at a load of food that we ate in one day in our house and followed it back to where it came from, the climate risk. And there wasn't one thing that didn't have some climate risk, either for the farmers who are producing it or the supply chain, even potato growers in the east of Scotland, because I love chips, right? Everyone loves chips.
I love chips, yeah.
And I love Scottish potatoes. We've got just to blow our trumpet, we've got one of the best seed potato industries in Europe, if not the world, here in Scotland. And it rains a lot, right? So you think, well, it's good for potatoes, but climate change means, particularly in our summers in the east of Scotland, it's getting really dry, much drier. And that's putting the potato industry at risk in the east of Scotland. So it's close to home as well as through these long international supply chains.
I guess one thing that comes up in all of this, in quite a lot of meetings I've been in recently, who has the power? So people are like, is it the supermarkets? Is it the consumers? Is it the politicians? Who can actually make a difference?
Yeah, I mean, it's all of them. I'd say the supermarkets have, in this country, a really important role. They have a lot of power. If you're a farmer and you're, again, trying to make a living, they do hold a lot of the cards. I think government have a really important role to play in this and probably need to be more proactive with the supermarkets as that interim between the producers and the consumers.
And I'm just picturing conversations with supermarkets and policymakers and really the supermarkets saying we want to do more, but if we do more and then they're not as competitive as another supermarket, then that's not going to work. So we're a bit stuck. So they don't think they've got the power in that sense. And then governments are sort of, we want to, I can see there's lots of people who understand what needs doing, but then they don't want to get voted out. So it feels like they can't move. So who does have the power?
Being voted out of power because you've put into place policies which you believe in, I think has to be a risk for any party that's worth its salt. So just saying, this is going to be this is going to upset some people. They shouldn't be politicians and they shouldn't be running for power. Government are key in terms of the regulation of those supermarkets. If the supermarkets are saying, we'll do this, but then we'll be at a competitive disadvantage, that's where regulation should be saying, no, all of you need to be doing this. This is the benchmark, and actually you'll be penalised if you don't. And tackling climate change and the nature crisis, you need brave government. This is not easy stuff. This is kind of the speed we've got to go at, the change in terms of jobs, the amount of investment, tackling the impacts, so adaptation and dealing with the impacts of climate change. They're all massive headaches for governments already around the world. But that is why we elect them, is they say we are going to protect you, make your lives better, improve your environment. So they need to be brave. If they're not being brave, they shouldn't be on the ballot for the election.
Brilliant. And I guess we need listeners to really, reward that kind of boldness as well, I suppose. So there's a role that we can all play in that. Yeah, brilliant. Yeah. I'd love to know much more about your massive change that you've done. You've got this new place, you're trying to reduce completely your emissions that you've had in your life. Tell me more about it. It sounds really exciting.
Yeah, so it's finally into the exciting phase now, Sarah, because it's been a long time in the planning. So about 5 years ago, we scraped together every penny we could, remortgaged the house we had up to the maximum, and bought a bit of land on the west coast of Scotland. And the idea was for me to do research, so to work out how much carbon it already had in the soils. So it's basically an old sheep farm, but it has some woodlands. So do the full kind of carbony geek stuff on it, but then start planting trees and start moving the sheep off. So over the last 5 years, we worked with our local farmer who had the sheep on the land to gradually move them off bits of our fields and plant trees. And so that's an ongoing process. The aim is to measure that, which is kind of my job. But I guess the vision is that we'll sequester the equivalent of all of our emissions from our family, and hopefully even more than that, from our whole lifetimes. So hopefully I've got a good few days to go, but when I do end my days, to end my days net zero is my dream.
Wow, and that sounds like a huge task. So how much emissions is that you've got to now make up for?
Yeah, it's unfortunately a lot. So I'm in my early 50s, and over that time, I haven't flown for 20 years, and I've been a climate scientist for 30 years. So it's been something where I've always been, I think, relatively low emission compared to average, but that still means over that time, that's probably 250 tons of carbon dioxide that I need to sequester, so trap in the trees and soil here on the farm. I'm planting 50,000 trees though, so I can definitely do that much. In fact, I should go way beyond that and do the whole family and probably all the relatives and friends. The caveat to that, when I tell relatives and friends, is if they want to be included, they have to come and help plant trees.
Wow. So you're up in Kintyre as well, which must be absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, it's stunning. The main issue I've got where we've taken the sheep off is we have a lot of deer. So this is going back to the food thing, is I haven't eaten meat for about 10 years, but I will be eating venison at some point because I will be shooting the deer, and then I think it's only right that I eat them as well. And for me, that's probably, I haven't looked on Hannah Ritchie's charts whether anyone's done wild deer, but I reckon the net effect, certainly on my farm, is going to be kind of carbon positive by shooting the deer, because they've been eating all my trees, or a lot of them. So yeah, probably if we speak again in a year's time, I might be in front of you with a big venison steak in front of me.
I'm almost now thinking, gosh, nothing I can do will come close, so I should give up. I guess we talked about some changes you can make, and I'm thinking now about time. For I don't really want to spend more time making my food and so on. I've got a certain amount of time available. What sorts of things can I do that would help with that? So, I actually got a veg box for a while, and I realised I was spending hours every weekend chopping vegetables, which I enjoyed, but I've decided now, I'm going to have a break for a bit. So, sometimes it feels like you should invest vast amounts of energy and time into things. Is that really necessary?
I don't think so. I think, like anything, it's really good to spend a bit of time. Listen to a really nice podcast like Sarah Bridle's one, like you're all doing now, just so you kind of get some of the facts. Look at our world in data. If you've got with a coffee, and just look at the numbers, and just so you can kind of go in aware. When you go into a food shop, I find this, and you go in, you think, well, I need to minimise packaging, and I want to have low food miles. I want local. Do I want organic? Should I eat any meat, and which meat? It's really complicated, and there's a lot of stuff on the labels, as well as nutrition and price, all these things to weigh up. And ultimately, we're all time poor and money poor. So having some good information sources to draw on to help you decide, but not beat yourself up about it. I think ultimately it's kind of, if you've got that awareness and where you kind of have that opportunity and go, oh yeah, tonight we'll have a meat-free night, and we'll do something which is, again, hopefully really easy and hopefully, cheap, but means no meat, and see if that's something that works for you. If it doesn't work for you, then fair enough. But try, I think, would be my main suggestion. I guess one of the things, if you go down this rabbit warren potentially of being an environmentally friendly person in everything you do, is you end up completely tied in knots potentially, because you're saying, well, this has got more packaging, but it's from a closer place, and you're trying to make all these trade-offs. And that's where I come back to podcasts like this are so important. Your book, Our World in Data, what they show is actually things like packaging and food miles, they're really minor. If you're worried about climate change, they're a few percent of the footprint of the food. What counts with the food, in my view, is one, can you afford it, and is it what you want to eat? And then after that, is it the lower emission option? So in most cases, that will be reducing the amount of meat, particularly red meat intake. I think the thing that puts people off the most is probably going, right, I'm going to get this vegan cheese, and then going, oh, this is bloody horrible. I remember it as well. And actually, trying to do stuff with a hair shirt, I think it doesn't work for most people. It's not a stickable solution. Doing stuff which works for you, but doing it in an informed way, which is why, like I say, this podcast is such a brilliant thing.
Oh, thank you. And also we'll be getting into packaging and things that you mentioned there in future podcasts in more detail. So that's really helpful to flag that up. I completely agree with you. So the final question that I'm asking all my guests is, what are you going to have for dinner today?
Oh, good question. So
sorry to spring that on you.
Yeah, because it's a Thursday. Thursday tends to be a bit of a boring meal, unfortunately, because I'm cooking it. So it will be pasta and a tomato sauce, and I've made some bread. So I tend to make my own bread. So we'll have probably some garlic bread with that, and just to spice it up a bit, maybe a few pickled chilies on top. So pretty boring, but I love it. It's
Good. That sounds good. I've been hungry.
Yes, some almonds and hazelnuts beforehand, so I don't eat other snacks.
That's great to hear. I almost feel quite relieved, because I felt quite overwhelmed in the middle about the amount that you're doing, but that sounds sort of attainable as well. That doesn't sound like an incredible amount of time that you're going to... They're making your own bread. That is quite dedicated. So
I cheat. I use a bread maker, so it's a really... Basically, I just do the dough and then it's done. So yeah, anything for a nice, quick and easy time, so I can go and plant more trees.
Amazing. Well, I shall picture you planting your trees and eating your pasta and tomato sauce and garlic bread. Thank you so much, Dave. It's been super fun chatting with you, and I hope you have a lovely dinner. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah.